I am somebody. I may be poor, but I am somebody.
Welcome to the Saturday Morning Community Forum. Every week we want to inspire, inform, and encourage you to get involved and get engaged in the movement for social justice and social change. Today, we dedicate our broadcast to former Congressman Alcee Hastings. He's an attorney that later became a judge and then was elected to Congress from Florida, a state that we've had many voter suppression and voter challenges. Alcee Hastings was a civil rights fighter. We will miss his activity in the Congress as a representative from the state of Florida. It will decrease the Democratic majority slightly in the United States House of Representatives. We will miss Congressman Alcee Hastings. Also, our entire organization is saddened by the transition of our Mr. St. Clair Booker. He's called Uncle Saint by so many of us who grew up learning from Uncle Saint. He helped to raise so many of us in the movement, helped to mentor and encourage us. I mean, a freedom fighter, a deacon at Fellowship Missionary Baptist Church, and then he was a travel companion, confidant, advisor. He was a true senior advisor to Reverend Jesse Jackson. He made his transition this week. He's a founding member of our organization. Mr. Booker represented so much in terms of this organization, and he taught us how to demonstrate with dignity and pride. He made sure that all of us learned the tenets and principles of nonviolent direct action. I can't tell you all that Mr. Booker means to each one of us, and everyone has a Mr. Booker, Uncle Saint story. So I'm not going to get into it, but we dedicate the broadcast to our Uncle St. Clair Booker. And then to Jean Wing, the wife of Butch Wing, a preeminent educator in San Francisco, led that San Francisco school district to many creative educational reforms and changes. We're going to miss all of them. They had an impact on lives. They challenged people to be different and to push for excellence. We thank each one of them for sharing some portion of their lives with us. Now today we have a power-packed broadcast. There's several things we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about several programs and projects that PUSH is engaged in. I know you keep wondering, what are y'all doing over there? Well, we have a national fair housing project led by Bishop Tavis Grant, and you're going to learn about what it is we're doing at Concordia Place that should be replicated all across the country. We're engaging members of our 1,000 churches connected to join us in our fair housing initiative. We want everybody to live in affordable, clean, sanitary conditions, particularly during a pandemic. But you should not have to live low because you're poor. You ought to be able to live well, no matter what your economic status is. And so you're going to hear from Bishop Tavis Grant on our housing project.
Once more again here doing the work in Chicago, Concordia Place Apartments, where we have really responded in a real way. We want to thank our corporate partners for helping us serve well over 300 kids today for Easter weekend, as we remember Christ and remember the cause of Christ, and that is the fight for the poor, don't fight the poor. Listen, I want to thank you for helping us keep the work of Reverend Jesse Jackson alive. Go to our website, www.rainbowpush.org, or go to 773-373-3366, freedom on your dial. Get in while you can. When you do, we'll win. It's always better when we get together. This is your brother, Bishop Grant. Thank you.
We here at Push Excel are shaking things up and doing things a little bit different. We realize that you are interested in getting into HBCUs, attending them, excelling, and paying for them. However, we want to equip you with the resources to do so. So, starting April 24th, we are going to be bringing you a market research study with this book here, Raise Your GPA, God's Way to Win at School and Life. We'll be working with Jonathan Banks, and he will be bringing this information to not only you and your families and your students, because he realizes that students do not get 4.0s, families get 4.0s, and he is going to help us excel at that. So after that, we are also going to be bringing you more programs every Saturday for you to excel with the process of attending the HBCUs that you want to attend. All of your organizations, we invite you to join us. Call here at Rainbow Push Excel, so that we can have you join us with this process. Help your students excel. We want you on the bus with us to success.
Jurors gearing up for another explosive week in the murder trial of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin. Week 1 filled with disturbing details, painful videos, and powerful testimony as witnesses relived what they saw that day, like the store clerk who said he feels guilty for alerting his manager he thought George Floyd used a counterfeit bill, setting the events in motion.
Why guilt?
If I would have just not taken the bill, this could have been avoided.
I do.
The prosecution also calling on law enforcement officials to testify against one of their own.
Putting your knee on a neck for that amount of time is just uncalled for.
The defense claiming the crowd of bystanders growing louder as the minutes went on distracted Chauvin, pressing firefighter Genevieve Hansen, who told the jury she wasn't allowed to offer medical aid.
Would you describe other people's demeanors as upset or angry?
I don't know if you've seen anybody be killed, but it's upsetting.
He's not responsive right now, bro.
And bystander Donald Williams, who can be heard shouting at Chauvin.
Those terms grew more and more angry. Would you agree with that?
They grew more and more pleading for life.
The defense expected to continue arguing Floyd's drug use and heart issues contributed to his death.
I am so excited today. We have with us the chairman of the board of the Rainbow Push Coalition, but also she's president of the National Bar Association, the largest African-American bar association in the world. We have none other than attorney C.K. Hoffler, who's going to share some insights for us into the Derek Chauvin trial.
First of all, we have to label it as the Derek Chauvin trial. It is not the George Floyd murder trial. It is the Derek Chauvin trial. So, and the reason why I say that, mainstream media has reinforced the notion that George Floyd is on trial. And indeed, that is the defense's position. So just to kind of set the table, when you have a criminal case, it is very different from a civil case. A civil case, let's say if you had an automobile accident or a wrongful death action, meaning you went to a hospital and a doctor was negligent in his or her treatment of you, of a loved one, that's a civil claim that you would bring against the doctor, against the driver of a vehicle, or someone who has done wrong to you in a civil court. You would hire a lawyer and you would be a plaintiff. And in that instance, in general, the burden of proof, meaning what you'd have to prove to win your case, is by the preponderance of the evidence in general. And in some states, they call it the greater weight of the evidence. And I like to equate it to the scales of justice. The scales of justice are supposedly even when people go into a case. The greater weight of the evidence just ever so slightly tips those scales. That would be 50.000001. Ever so slightly tips those scales in favor of the plaintiff or defendant. And that is what is meant by the greater weight of the evidence for one party or the other to prevail. That's what we call the burden of proof in a civil case. And the Derek Chauvin case, and in most criminal cases, actually in all criminal cases, the burden of proof is completely different. Meaning you've got to prove your case if you're prosecuting the case. So remember, in a civil case, you've got the plaintiff's lawyer, and you've got a defendant's lawyer, the defense lawyer. Plaintiff's lawyer and defense, that's civil case. Criminal case, the terminology is different. You've got the prosecutor who's bringing the case on behalf of either the state or the feds. So you have federal prosecutors, you have district attorneys, you have, but they are prosecutors who are prosecuting a crime. So in the case of Derek Chauvin, the crimes surround what Officer Derek Chauvin did, which led, in my impression, to the death, the killing that led to the death of George Floyd. Why do I say in my impression? Well, this is a trial. So the prosecutors have to prove, and then we get into that standard, beyond a reasonable doubt. Remember, we said in a civil case, it's just slightly tip the scales. In a criminal case, it's different. It's got to be off the top, really, I say out of the roof, where you've got to prove your case beyond a reasonable doubt. So you have to prove that case that this person, in this case, Derek Chauvin, murdered George Floyd. Now, many people would say, well, of course he murdered George Floyd. I saw it. Initially, I saw it in 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Well, we now know it was 9 minutes and 29 seconds where he had his knee to his neck and was pushing on it more and more and more until he died. As the prosecutor said in opening statement, just trust your eyes. If we trust our eyes, most people would say, well, if we trust our eyes, we saw him actually kill George Floyd. Makes sense to me. I would agree. But when you have a trial is about laying the evidence and proving your case. It's not enough to just show the video, even though the video is by far, the most compelling evidence in the case is that video, 9 minutes and 29 seconds of Derek Chauvin killing George Floyd. Most compelling. First degree, second degree, third degree murder. What that means is there are varying levels of elements that you have to prove. And it goes to the intent. You know, there's one thing when people are negligent. I negligently did something. But if to really prove murder, there's got to be reckless disregard. There's got to be that intent to harm, that intent to kill. And I believe that the prosecution will have evidence to show that. Let's talk about where we are now with the evidence that's been laid. The prosecution has laid, I think, a pretty compelling case. You know, in a trial is very, very volatile. You never know how the evidence is going to come out. But by and large, with the exception of maybe a witness here or there, the evidence thus far has been very compelling to demonstrate that indeed Derek Chauvin murdered George Floyd. From the witness statements, from the most compelling piece of evidence, the video, from the words, most compelling evidence to me was the words of the police chief that said, in essence, that Derek Chauvin's conduct fell outside of the training that he received as a police officer for handling those types of situations. And then that police chief said, let's go a step further. He spoke truth to power. He told the truth. He stood up and said he should have stopped putting pressure on his neck and choking him once George Floyd was subdued. And we know from the video that was early on. And definitely once he started pleading for his life that he couldn't breathe. So you see, there were minutes and seconds. And as you know, when it comes to our airwaves, minutes and seconds count because they make the difference between life or death. So very compelling evidence. I'd also like to point out the evidence that was and the testimony of his girlfriend. The reason why I'd like to raise that is I believe that even though people may have known that his girlfriend was white or was Caucasian, the reality of seeing this white young lady testify about how she loved this Black man who the defense, ladies and gentlemen, the defense is going to paint George Floyd out to be a big bad King Kong-like gorilla who was unruly, out of his mind, on drugs, sick, bad heart, had every ailment and was a bad person, they're going to demonize him because they're going to turn this case around and make it not about what Derek Chauvin did, his breaches, his actions, his deviations, his violations, his tactics, his oppressive actions. And they're going to flip the switch and pivot to how bad of a person George Floyd they're going to submit was. His medical condition. So then the reasonable doubt, that's what they're going to try to do, to inject that reasonable doubt in the minds of those jurors that there were other things that were responsible for the death of George Floyd, other than putting his knee on his neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. That's going to be how they're going to attempt, I would predict, and how they've tried to do thus far, to create that reasonable doubt for the jurors to feel somewhat uneasy about George Floyd, that uneasy about this relationship that he had with this wholesome looking white woman who testified about how she loved him, how he was loving, how he was a mama's boy, how he was caring. That's different from the image the defense is trying to portray. Remember, in a criminal case, you've got the prosecution prosecuting. That's what we see first. They put their case on first. And then you've got the defense. That's those who are defending the police officer. And indeed, in this case, they're defending really law enforcement. Although that's why it was so compelling to hear from the police chief, because he's law enforcement, rank and file. The chief who's saying, oh, wait a minute now, I got to call it how I see it. Derek Chauvin violated what he was taught, the training, the ethics, and the professionalism expected of a police officer under these circumstances. And then he dissected why he felt that way. So the defense, we have to wait. And remember, it's not really how we feel that's important, it's how those jurors feel. In the courtroom earlier today, I have a radio show. And on my radio show, I had Jonathan Jackson, who's the national spokesperson of Rainbow Push. I also had Ben Crump, who is the lawyer to the George Floyd family and who is a civil rights lawyer extraordinaire. And I had George Floyd's brother. And Ben Crump and George Floyd's brother came out of the courtroom to give our listeners an idea of what it was like inside there. Because while we see things on TV, it is what that jury sees and perceives. And there's certainly a different dynamic when you're there and you're looking at the witnesses testify day in and day out as they are. So as some people say, oh, this is a slam dunk, there's no such thing as a slam dunk case in litigation. It does not exist. There's compelling evidence, but remember, the standard of proof, the burden that the prosecution has is beyond a reasonable doubt. Indeed, I think they're well on their way. They've got to do a little more, in my humble impression, going to the intent, going to the relationship or knowledge that Derek Chauvin had of George Floyd. After all, they did work at the same, Derek Chauvin moonlighted at a club, and and George Floyd also worked there. So they were in a sense, colleagues, if you will. Derek Chauvin, I would dare say, knew who George Floyd was, knew the kind of person he was, had developed an impression of George Floyd, knew the kind of people that he was surrounded by. He knew that he was very affable, popular at that club that they worked at. This was not just someone who was random. Derek Chauvin, when he approached George Floyd, knew who he was, and his actions, that 9 minutes and 29 seconds against his neck, killing him slowly, painfully, deliberately, intentionally, in my impression, will mean something to that jury if the evidence is laid that way. Derek Chauvin's not going to take the stand. He might. I doubt he would take the stand. That would be suicide for him in this case, but maybe he might. So, and if he did take the stand, he's not probably going to admit to the kind of relationship I'm talking about that must have existed and how he felt about George Floyd. It could not have been a chance encounter that day. What about the alleged $20 counterfeit bill? that kind of got lost in the shuffle. We didn't hear any evidence of the police officers or Derek Chauvin going back into the store looking at that evidence. George Floyd died, as Jonathan Jackson said today, with probably not even understanding why this was happening to him. Because if you pass a counterfeit bill at a store like that, death is not what would result in criminal prosecution. Some type of misdemeanor or something, but not death. Not death that way, with a knee at your neck, handcuffed, where every living breath that you take is stomped out of your body. No, that's not what happens for, even if it were true, an alleged $20 counterfeit bill. So ladies and gentlemen, this trial has major local, national, global, international implications. It brings together the civil rights community, the human rights community, the forces of policing reform, criminal justice reform, and bare bones justice in this family, all together with race, because for sure, the racial animus that may have existed in the heart of Derek Chauvin can be deduced from the evidence that we've seen at this point. And at a minimum, although the judge would not allow prior bad acts where he had done something similar to others, this chokehold thing that he used, there were other instances. And even though the jury was not able to hear that evidence, at least not thus far, that would be compelling. And the judge made that ruling. The judge made a determination between the probative value, meaning the value of that evidence, what does it tend to prove, versus the prejudicial effect of the evidence, and excluded that. And so the jury's not going to hear that, at least not thus far. So I think we've got to look at this case very carefully, listen to the evidence, but more importantly, trust what we see. Trust what we see.
Attention high school seniors and college freshmen, sophomores, and juniors. If you are in need of financial assistance, Push for Excellence offers a variety of scholarships for which you may be eligible to apply. Whether it's the Jesse Jackson Fellows Toyota Scholarship, the Cirillo McSween New York Life Scholarship, or the Oralee Sanders Scholarship, Push for Excellence strives to offer something for everyone. Here are just a few of our scholarship recipients.
Hello everyone viewing, my name is Chidi Osakwe,
Dominic Davis,
Julian Jones,
China Mazum,
Miles Cherubin,
Jalen Clark,
Marcus Anderson,
Jaden Reed,
Kari Young,
Ms. Megan Chu, and I'm a Cirillo McSween Scholar.
I want to take this opportunity to thank Reverend Jesse Jackson for all his support of my college education.
Thank you for all of Toyota for helping with Reverend Jackson with the scholarship as well.
I just want to take the opportunity to say thank you to Reverend Jesse Jackson for helping to make this scholarship opportunity possible for me.
As appreciative as I was before, I'm even more grateful now having received this scholarship.
Not only has it helped me out financially with paying for tuition, but it has also awarded me the opportunity to learn more about the Rainbow Push Coalition and their different initiatives in the African American community.
I'd like to say thank you to Reverend Jesse Jackson and the Rainbow Push Coalition for all the generosity and support that they've shown me throughout my undergraduate career and for the opportunity to pursue higher education.
For more information, please visit our website at www.pushexcel.org and click on the word scholarships. Thank you, and keep hope alive.
Push Excel's goal is to inspire students to strive for excellence in education in spite of personal, family, and community challenges that they might experience. How do we do this? By advocating for educational policies that guarantee equal funding for all students without regard to race or economic standing. By engaging parents, students, and teachers in pursuing high-quality education and striving for educational excellence at every level, and by forging partnerships with community-based and public sector stakeholders in education. Now, Push Excel is a national model program with the purpose of connecting principals, parents, popular personalities, and students in a bond and to support students at every level on the educational ladder. Now, we want you to become a member of the Rainbow Push Coalition and Push Excel. Your annual membership can help us to change policies that impact students, colleges, and universities all around the country. So step up and sign up today. Membership is only $35, and if you're a student or a senior, $15. Just go to our website, rainbowpush.org, and push join to become a member or push donate to support the Push Excel program. You can also text the word Push Excel, that's PUSHEXCEL, to 41444 on your cell phone, and you can give us any amount that you feel comfortable giving or call us at 773-256-2775. Wherever you are, you can support us as we keep pushing for you. And remember to keep hope alive.
Reverend Jesse Jackson began this work in the late 1990s. He gathered with Silicon Valley leaders in the 90s to talk about this evolving reality of technology and the digital world.
We could bring to pass the vision of Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson Sr., and that is equality even in the tech industry, so that the bad hand that we had been dealt with can be replaced by a good hand of equality of opportunities.
That we should be focused on making sure that our advancements are structural, so that we're actually building new infrastructure, new policy, new ways of doing business that will survive.
Be values driven and don't compromise, and define for your life, this is how I prefer to be treated, this is how I will be treated, and really get with a company that aligns with your values. There's plenty of tech companies out there, and don't budge on that.
People who look like us, Black and brown Americans, to not just get online, but fully leverage this new tech economy and this new online economy that now drives the American economy.
What I would say to tech workers at this moment is, this is a moment of opportunity. If you're not applying for the promotion, if you're not applying for the loan, now, don't wait. Get out there. Make these companies make good on their commitments to invest in the African American, Latinx, and other underrepresented minority communities.
These important conversations might not be possible because of your support and partnership. Our collaborative work of advancing economic justice and inclusion in the tech sector will continue.
Another year of excitement, another year of impact, and another year we get to share as we gather the family together to do something great.
wanted to open up this portion of the broadcast with our Southeast Regional Director, Attorney Robert Patillo. He has been engaged in a number of things in Georgia, including voter suppression, anti-voter suppression legislation, march to the polls. Throughout this pandemic, he's been working with us on interpreting the stimulus package. And this stimulus package is going to be more far-reaching than the previous one. And we wanted to make sure that all of our not-for-profits and faith leaders were aware of the nuances of it, what the deadlines are, and what the opportunities are that exist within the stimulus, what I call stimulus 2. So Attorney Patillo, if you could share with us.
So one of the most important things for people to understand between last year's stimulus and this year's stimulus is who is eligible for the Paycheck Protection Program. So the people who qualify is any entity that's been affected by COVID-19, that's a sole proprietorship, independent contractor, self-employed person, as well as a small business who meets the SBA small business standards. Any business that is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, 501c19 veterans organization, tribal business under Section 31B2C or of the Small Business Act that has at least 500 employees. Any business that is NAICA code certified, and also churches that have a nonprofit wing. Now, the PPP cannot be used for the ecumenical services because that will violate that separation of church and state that we always talk about. But any non-ministerial services that are part of the nonprofit for a church will be covered under the Paycheck Protection Act. Now, they have extended the deadline for applying. Originally, the deadline was the end of March. They've extended it to May 31st of 2021. So if you have not gotten your application in, you should get that application in expeditiously if possible. In order to apply, you apply directly through your bank or your lending institutions. Just as with last year, we have found this year that people have had more success with smaller lenders because the large lenders, of course, are being swamped. So your Chases, your Wells Fargo, they have so many applications that if you're applying through a community bank, through a Black-owned bank, through a credit union, often that information is processed more quickly. Additionally, your personal banker is going to have a financial incentive to get your loan processed and get your loan through because banks get about a 4% kickback on the loans. So they want to help you get these loans. So they want to help you get the documentation. Now, when it comes to documentation, because a lot of people get scared when it comes to documentation, particularly dealing with the federal government, don't be afraid of those things because particularly if you're a small business or a sole proprietorship or a small church or a small nonprofit, the documentation requirements are far less onerous than they were previously. So you should talk directly with your banker in order to determine what exactly your qualifications would be and and what you need to have on hand. But primarily, you're going to want to have a 12-month income, profit and loss statement on hand to show what your payroll was for the previous 12 months. Additionally, how much the difference was between 2020 when COVID hit and 2019 prior to that, how much of your money is going towards payroll and covered in qualifying expenses that I'll cover in a couple minutes, and then a clear accounting what's going on. The reason for this was that in round one of the PPP program, there were tremendous amounts of fraud. So we saw things like Shake Shack getting a PPP loan, which it was not intended for. Ruth Chris was getting PPP loans. We saw other individuals would get PPP loans. I think there was a rapper here in Atlanta who bought a Lamborghini with his loan, and he is currently headed towards federal prison for that reason. So the reason these documentation requirements are in place isn't just to be onerous on the individual, but to ensure that the money is that this finite amount of money is getting to the people who need it and not simply being squandered and wasted. So once you talk to your community bank, you want to make sure that you get your documentation together for your application packet. So that's going to include your profit and loss statements, the amount that you're requesting in the PPP, what your monthly bills are, your covered billing expenses. Now, PPP can be used to cover everything from mortgage expenses, capital costs, utility expenses that are associated with the business or the nonprofit nonprofit, as well as incidental fees, as long as you are documenting them properly. So proper bookkeeping is definitely going to pay off right now in this in the application process for these loans. Now, when it comes to the repayment, this is where some people get confused and some people get in trouble. I'm going to give you a resource that people can go to is sba.gov/funding/COVID-19. sba.gov/funding/COVID-19, and that takes you to all the rules for the PPP program that will explain to you how to apply and all the rules for repayment. One thing for people who are sole proprietors who are applying for the PPP loan, there is a fast track process for you. So if you are a sole proprietor without additional employees, you're simply trying to keep a hair salon or a barbershop or a accounting business that you do where you're the only employee, you can go to www.womply.com, WOMPLY.com, and that has a fast track application that only takes about 30 minutes to fill out, predicated on you being a 1040 sole proprietor, where you simply put in your 2020 tax information. It takes about, as I said, 15 to 30 minutes to apply for it, and you usually have your determination back in about 30 days. If you are a larger organization, then you can expect a more involved application process with your bank, and then you can also expect it to be about maybe about a month to 6 weeks before you get a determination back as to if you have been approved for funding. So on the issue of repayment, if you do not meet the criteria for forgiveness of the PPP loan, because as most of us know, the PPP loan converts to a grant. That's the beauty of the program, that you borrow this money, but if you meet the criteria set out by the statute, then it turns into a grant that you don't have to pay back. So it turns into free money, but the government wants to make sure that you're actually using it for the right purpose first, and that's why they put this process of applying for forgiveness in. They've not set out the statutory deadlines yet for when you need to repay them, but that guidance will be coming down the line. But what they will be looking for is very clear documentation on how you have used the funds. So you do, once you receive the PPP funding, you do want to make sure that you're keeping every receipt, every virtual payment, every credit card statement available, so that you will be able to clearly articulate to the government that you have used the funds for the proper purposes, including payroll, including mortgage debt, including utilities, and those sorts of things. As I said, this is the abbreviated version because it can get very long and technical. We do ask people that if you do have any questions, feel free to email me at rpatillo@rainbowpush.org. If you need more additional resources, you can go directly to your bank or to your loan provider. Also, SBA.gov is an outstanding resource where they have a clearinghouse of information, as well as videos and tutorials where you can find out information on the application process and also work towards your goals of getting that funding. With that, I will turn the floor back over to Reverend Wilson.
Bishop Grant needs to share with all of you our housing project, which is a national initiative. And it's very important that this month is the anniversary of the Fair Housing Act, 1968. And one of the things that Bishop Grant is going to talk about is our project at Concordia and how each of you need to look at what is happening with HUD housing and see the parallels, similarities that is occurring in your community, in your city, where poor people are living in certain kinds of conditions.
The basketball rims don't have nets on them, they took them off.
At the beginning of Women's History Month, Reverend Jackson was alerted by Rainbow Push Coalition National Field Director Bishop Tavis Grant and National Youth Director Reverend Cameron Barnes of complaints of mold, mice, lack of repairs, and proper management at Concordia Place Apartments, affecting the lives of women and children.
We shouldn't live like this. A dog live better than this.
We found certain patterns that we found to be quite disturbing.
Reverend Jackson and staff acted immediately and arranged meetings with Capital Realty Group officials and HUD officials to discuss the problems and find some possible resolutions.
You need to be treated with dignity and respect, and we need to resolve these issues. HUD, I'm here today because we're committed to it.
What we supposed to do? It's not right. It's not right. It's not fair. It's like you said, you don't go home to rest. Your kids not crying. Your kids is not sleeping in the bed with you. And they scared. It's not right. But I want you to tell me what you gonna do with this. Hello. What you gonna do with this? What you gonna do with this? What you gonna do with this? What you gonna do with it? Look at everything. What you gonna do?
I know what it is, and I'm very sorry. I know what it is, and I'm very sorry.
Tell them about the maintenance men
Walking
coming.
in my house while I'm naked, and I have them on camera saying that the management said that they can. I had no notice, no letter, because I'm always prepared when they're ready to come in. I'm always at home, and somebody always in my house, and I have 4 girls and 1 boy.
You're the problem. I think HUD needs to convene the next meeting, because if they don't mean HUD signs, it may mean nothing. That's how HUD is in the equation, right? So just blowing off does not help us at all.
In closing, to what the Reverend was referring now, we will do what it takes, whatever HUD wants us to do. The plan was to do the inspections, not do any remediation. Before we do remediation, have HUD decide, and as the Push Coalition decide the right way of the remediation. The plan is just to do the inspections, besides for the today's exterminating and the mold, which is obviously 2 crucial things.
As many of you all know, this pandemic has exacerbated all levels of unemployment, uninsured, those who don't have access to capital and have access to medicine and appropriate health care. So our work here at Concordia is very significant to raising quality of life and restoring the dignity of people.
Tenants were given the great news during the Saturday meeting that thus far, the laundromat is now open on weekends. There is no longer only one way in and one way out of the apartment complex. Previously, a child died due to non-access to the complex. If cars were towed during the snowstorm, everyone will have their $220 refunded. Because of the list of demands, there will be a mandatory inspection of the 297 units at Concordia Place. Each tenant will be given 48 hours notice before the inspection begins. Rent calculations will be reevaluated. Playground will be open. Basketball nets will be restored so the courts can reopen. Grills can be used. The Rainbow Push Coalition and the tenants will work together to ensure that real change is going to come. Reverend Jackson is now calling on a rent strike being organized until repairs are made to remove mold, rodent infestations, and replacement of new appliances.
I appreciate you all for coming out to support us in this fight that we've been having at Concordia Place Apartments to get livable conditions. And we thank you for your continuous fight and continuous help. We really appreciate it because we have hope now. Because at first we didn't have any hope, but now we do have hope, and we thank you so very much.
This is our next step to finally getting something done.
I like the new improvements that they finna start having. I hope they take the no parking signs down so we can park.
Hopefully everything is going to be updated soon and we can see change.
I'm glad that we've come together as a community to get things in order, and I'm here for the change.
Those of you who are participating on this platform, we certainly appreciate your time and your presence as we are endeavoring to keep hope alive. April 11th marks the anniversary of the Fair Housing Act, which was passed in 1968 to fix residential segregation by preventing individuals from marginalized communities from being discriminated against in the sale or rental of housing. Several dynamics have impeded and created great impediment for this to be actualized. One is the Great Recession, the other is the housing crisis of 2000s, and the current COVID pandemic, which all three have hit Black homeowners harder than any other racial group, entirely wiping out middle-class wealth at epidemic proportions. Black Americans are more likely to be isolated geographically and concentrated racially. The health gap, the educational gap, the employment gap, and the wealth gap between white families and Black and Latino families continue to increase as we pursue all and every measure to bring about a true sense of perfection in our union. There's been a great failure in achieving fair housing, and that is because the Fair Housing Act has the mandate of both preventing new discrimination and reversing the damage brought by the federal government itself. So there are three dynamics to this as we look at the Concordia Place incident. One is persistent unaffordability. The coronavirus pandemic came to the US and forced individuals into crisis level housing with tremendous affordability issues, especially for low income households. In 2019 alone, there were well over 38 million households with what we call housing cost burdens, spending 30% or more of their income on housing. This represented 40% of all households nationally. 1 in 7 households, 17 million in total, were severely cost burdened by the pandemic and by the economy. Renters were more cost burdened than any other group, with 46% of renters cost burden compared to 21% of homeowners. And so now we know why the stimulus was so effective in not only just rescuing homeowners, but providing rental assistance and a moratorium on eviction. Cost burdens were greatest amongst low-income households, particularly for Black and brown persons. The second factor is the growing nature of racial disparities. One of the challenges that Reverend Jackson has confronted is the persistent and growth in significant disparities in housing. Chief among these is the racial gap in home ownership. The gap between households of color and white households continues to grow in exponential manners. The gap is now more than 40%, the largest gap since 1983. While white household ownership increased slightly in the past several years, Black home ownership has remained flat just at 40% for the past 10 years. So home ownership rate is significant to improving one's economic ability and coupled with access to capital. Number 3 is a widespread housing insecurity. The economic fallout of the pandemic and other crises combined with ongoing housing unaffordability puts millions of renters and homeowners at risk at losing their homes. Despite various policy protections for renters and homeowners enacted during this crisis, housing security remains the most tenuous challenge for many going into 2021, particularly renters and homeowners of color. Low-income individuals are victims of high prices, redlining, and pricing them out of the communities that they so desire to live in. And so there are several dynamics that Reverend Jackson's been leading in the Concordia Place apartments located here on the south side of Chicago. There are 300 families, and within that demographic represents 1,300 people, including women and children. And several things Reverend Jackson was able to accomplish. One, affording residents the right to organize based upon federal requirements and federal regulations given out by the Housing Development of the United States. And so developing a housing tenant association. And furthermore, engaging with Rainbow Push as members and supporters as we not just fight for them, we fight with them. These tenant meetings led to videos and testimonials, unit visitations, engagements, tenant petitions, letters and calls from elected officials, and Rainbow Push, along with HUD and the Tenant Association and Capital Realty, have now been working in a community covenant, and several things have been accomplished. One, a new garbage contract, which afforded residents the highest level of sanitation service, given the nature of this pandemic, that it breeds on areas where sanitation is low and exposure is great. Reverend Jackson was very effective in advocating for reimbursements to residents. There were well over $10,000 in towing fees that were given back to residents whose cars and automobiles were towed, what we felt was unethical and immoral in the midst of a snowstorm. Recreational areas were open. Open bans on recreational activities like barbecuing and grilling were lifted. Access to the laundromat 7 days a week. Exits in and out, which afforded residents, particularly working residents, opportunity to have access to transportation, particularly public transportation. Access to the common area, where there now be children activities, daycare, screening, and workforce development. Formal talks have been created by Reverend Jackson between HUD and Capital Management, where grievances and allegations of sexual harassment have been formally addressed, and they've created, that is Capital Realty, a zero tolerance policy as it relates to sexual harassment. And now there is a 100% mandatory inspection of all units in this housing complex. And so it's significant for us to understand the quest and the challenge that is coupled with the crisis of this pandemic, of us fighting for the poor rather than fighting the poor. And I would hope that you would go to our website, www.rainbowpush.org. I would hope that you would call us here in Chicago at 773-373, Freedom on your dial. Hit us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, as we are keeping hope alive. Thank you, Reverend Dr. Jeanette Wilson.
I thank you for tuning in each and every week. If you want to get involved, if you want to get inspired, you can go to YouTube and you'll hear more details of our Saturday broadcast. We give you highlights, but on YouTube, we're going to begin to show you our town halls in great detail. We're going to have many different things coming up to engage you, to inform you, to inspire you, that you might want to be part of this push for change. Thank you so much for tuning in each and every week.
For 2021, we're excited to get more people engaged and involved in Rainbow Push, supporting the programs of Push for Excellence and the Citizenship Education Fund. Now, if you're interested in public policy and you want to help change the policies that impact those who are incarcerated, you can do so. If you're interested in impacting public policies that benefit education and businesses with social economic solutions, you can do that as well. You can become a policymaker by becoming a member of Rainbow Push right now. Now, if you believe in the scholarships that we've given to thousands of students each year, you can help us out. We've awarded more than $10 million in scholarships year to date. Now, you can help young people achieve a higher education by becoming a member of Rainbow Push right now for the annual fee of only $35. And if you're a student or a senior, it's only $15. You can help us make a difference in the lives of millions. Now, if you watch us every week, or if you listen to us on the radio, or if you're viewing on social media, we need you to become a member. And how do you become a member? It's simple. Visit us at rainbowpush.org and press join. Maybe you'd like to support the work of Push. If so, it's really simple. You can do so by texting the word PUSH, that's P-U-S-H, to 41444 on your cell phone, and you can give any amount that you feel comfortable giving, or you can call us at 773-256-2775 or go to rainbowpush.org and push donate. So whenever you want to support, you can do it from anywhere. So keep pushing, because we're going to keep pushing for you and keep hope alive.
Dr. Kim, I went to jail with a group of 7 students, July 17, 1960, almost 60 years ago. We never stopped moving. I lost a few of jail cells and death. We never stopped moving. I thought it was time to write some of it down so the older generation can learn how we did, and what we did, and how global it was. was speaking about Mandela in South Africa, India, Qatar, about Gandhi in India, here at home. This book tells the story, so please get it and give it to your friends. Read it, let's argue about it, let's discuss it.
Yep, so the book is Keeping Hope Alive, Sermons and Speeches of Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. It's quite a good collection. You know, we've got sermons and speeches from around the globe because you have made such a global impact, not just here in the US, but around the world.
Thank you for tuning in to our International Saturday morning broadcast. We need your support. Here are ways to give to Rainbow Push Coalition. Text PUSH, P-U-S-H, to 41444 to support the work of Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. and Rainbow Push Coalition. When you shop, Amazon gives. Visit Amazon Smile and select Push for Excellence as your charitable organization by starting your shopping at smile.amazon.com.
Get involved with the movement.
Somebody. I may be poor, but I am somebody.
Join the movement.
If you're not a member, become a member.
I am somebody.
Fighting the most important battles for freedom and justice for all.
You made us change. Oh, trying to bring me closer.
Join Rainbow Push.
But you're not pushing me away.
Join the movement.